You finish watching a Rick and Morty episode. The credits roll, and you sit there thinking, what the hell just happened? Not in the fun way where you're processing a mind-bending sci-fi concept, but in the way where you genuinely don't know if what you watched was even canon, if any of it mattered, if the show just broke its own rules, or if breaking the rules was the rule. There are 3 episodes that do this more than any others, and once you see what they're really doing, you realize they might be the most important Rick and Morty episodes ever made. The first one starts like a normal anthology episode. A space train, passengers swapping stories about Rick Sanchez.
There's only one creature worth killing. The man in the white coat.
Each tale is more elaborate than the last. Rick with 5 arms and 5 guns. Rick saving Space Christmas. Then the first crack appears. A blonde woman starts telling her story about dating Rick, but she gets interrupted for creating a flashback. The man threatening her with a gun starts monologuing about narrative structure, about how the train amplifies and links unrelated narrative fields. And then they rip off their disguises. It's actually Rick and Morty. They know they're trapped in a literal story device, not metaphorically, actually and literally a story device. The conductor was in Blips and Chits arcade playing some sort of life simulator like Morty was when he was Roy. At this point you're wondering whether the whole train setting was actually just a game. But then we cut back to the train that deploys emergency continuity as oxygen masks. Rick breathes it in, takes the entire tank labeled continuity, and when the train police show up to stop them, they shoot the tank and blow it up. So this should kill them, right? Well, instead it cuts to a police training video using their death as an educational tool, because it keeps it continuous, right? So Rick and Morty are somehow in the classroom watching their own deaths. Rick finds a diagram in the teacher's desk, a circle divided into 8 parts. Dan Harmon's story circle, that's how he actually writes these episodes, the actual writing tool that the show uses on Rick and Morty. And then it gets more confusing. The episode gets more and more meta over time, kind of rising through the levels. So Storylord appears to want their story potential, meaning to mine Rick and Morty's infinite narrative possibilities to power his train beyond the 5th wall. Not the 4th wall, where the characters acknowledge the audience, which is us, the 5th wall. Every punch throws an unrelated cutaway narrative until Storylord hooks them up to a machine, forces them to experience every possible future. Abradolph Linkler, Phoenix Person versus Rick, Summer battling Tammy, a Sith Lord version of Mr. Poopy Butthole. Storylord represents everything, the audience demanding continuity, the network wanting broad appeal, the writer's room exhausted from mining story potential of this material. So Storylord is literally sucking them dry for content. It's a commentary on the modern industry and the way animation works nowadays. Rick's solution is deliberately stupid. He prays to Jesus Christ for salvation. Because, well, that kind of destroys all marketability, relatability, and broad appeal. Then the camera pulls back. The entire train, this whole adventure, is a toy. A literal toy train set in the Smiths' living room. The train derails, and Rick tells Morty to buy another one. A post-credits commercial advertises the Story Train playset, complete with Storylord and Jesus action figures. So none of it actually happened, but we watched it happen, right? 22 minutes of story that explicitly tell you that it's not a story. An episode that exists to not exist. So is it like an advertisement, or is it real? So why is this? Well, it's because the episode is actually showing you the machinery of how Rick and Morty episodes get made. Story circles, act breaks. The Bechdel test, for example, is a literal portal you have to pass through. Continuity as a substance you have to bottle and use, and it can explode. It's Rick and Morty commenting on itself, on us, on the very act of writing and watching Rick and Morty, on consumption, on creation. But that's just the first layer of the confusion that can be thought about, right? Because if this episode doesn't even count canonically, why does it feel like it matters so much in the grand story of Rick and Morty? Alright, so that's only the first episode that's weird. Well, I mean, all Rick and Morty episodes are weird in their own way, but the next one is even more weird. It starts with the Smith family sitting at breakfast. Rick announces they're going to kill God. Amazing.
He's been asleep for thousands of years. We're gonna sneak up there and kill him.
I love to do that on my Wednesdays. Then squid aliens burst in and murder everyone. Blood everywhere, bodies on the floor. Credits should roll. Amazing. Instead, we cut to another Smith family hunting Mr. Always Wants to be Hunted. Rick's watch beeps. A decoy family just died. Alright, so that's what it was. He grabs everyone, says that they need to run now, and the squid aliens find them and everyone dies again. Amazing. Cut to another family, another alert, another death. So this all happens 3 times in 2 minutes. A lot of decoy families getting murked here. By the third family, you're kind of already lost. So which one was real? Were any of them real? So are we just like jumping between different families at this point? And when another version of Summer asks,
how do you know we're not decoys? Oh my god, we're decoys.
Everything goes batshit crazy. This Rick checks his own decoys, and he finds his decoy family making their own decoys. And that's when the episode becomes a little bit incomprehensible. So every Rick kind of thinks he's the original, and they're all kind of hunting each other. Every Rick then created more and more decoys, and those decoys created decoys. An Asimov cascade is what they call it. Each one programmed to protect its own existence, which means creating decoys for itself, and that means then killing all of the ones that could potentially hurt it. The squid aliens, they're just decoys, or other Ricks in disguise. Decoys hunting decoys, dressed as squids hunting decoys. We watch a family for about 5 minutes, long enough to think, okay, these must be the real ones. We're following them, they're the main characters, they have a plan, they're going to survive. Then a scarecrow version of Rick captures them, wearing other Rick's skinned faces.
But those decoys made decoys too, and got lazy themselves. And far enough down the line, there be monsters.
Wooden puppet versions appear, glockenspiel smiths with painted smiles trying to save everyone. They build a sanctuary, other decoys find it. Everyone dies. A Rick summons all remaining decoys for a final battle. Hundreds of families converge. The screen becomes chaos. Ricks shooting Ricks, Mortys killing Mortys, all of them killing their doubles and their triples and their quadruples. It's a bloodbath. All of them gone. It's a massacre. One family survives. One Rick, who had an emotional breakthrough about loving his family. He won. He survived. He must be the real Rick. Mr. Always Wants to be Hunted appears and kills them all.
Somebody hunt me!
The real family, they've been in space with Spacebeth the entire time. Rick's wrist beeps. All decoys dead. Well, maybe he's another decoy. Now, this is what makes this episode kind of a little difficult to track, and it's because they use this visual language of television to lie to you constantly. Most of this episode is us presuming that we're following the main characters. So in TV, when we follow characters for a bit, they must be important, right? They couldn't possibly die. When someone has an emotional moment, it matters because it's relevant to the plot. When a family wins against impossible odds, when they overcome difficulty and we follow them and they go through emotional moments, there are heroes, there are protagonists. Mortyplicity does all of this, then kills them as the plot twist, then does it again and again. That scarecrow Rick who tortures other Ricks, we watch him long enough to think that he's significant. Dead. The Wooden family establishing a peaceful commune. Dead. The Rick who realizes he loves his family. Dead. By minute 15, you stop trying to follow who's who, like you really can't. You can't presume that they're actually a real Rick. The episode has trained you that caring about any specific family is kind of pointless. They're all going to die eventually. It's the show literally demonstrating its own philosophy again. Nothing matters, everything is replaceable, emotional investment is a universal joke. Except, I mean, most of the decoys believed they were real, they had real emotions. They fight desperately to survive. Every one of them has the same memories of being Rick, the same relationships, the same need to protect their family, the same love. The decoy Rick who admits that he loves them, that emotion was real to him. The Wooden Jerry who survives by abandoning everyone, his cowardice was real. The episode asks, if you can't tell the difference between who's real and who's fake, does the difference even matter? They're all people to begin with. And more disturbingly, are you even watching the real Rick and Morty? Do you even care? You might just be watching another decoy any episode of this entire show, and it doesn't really matter, because they're only the main characters because you're watching them. Now, both episodes we've just seen weaponizes the same fear. The fear that you're watching the wrong story. But where Never Rick and Morty does it through meta-commentary, Mortyplicity does it through multiplication. One denies reality, and the other drowns you in too much reality. And the last one? Alright, that one gets a bit worse. So, Rick tells Morty to stay in the car while he fixes their flat tire. In space. Morty doesn't listen to him. A snake in a tiny astronaut suit bites him. Morty kills it in self-defense. Rick then has to synthesize antivenom from the snake's home planet, which is this world of racist snakes on the brink of nuclear war. Different colored snakes, different factions, snake jazz on the radio that's just hissing to a beat. It's pretty good, actually. Morty realizes that their first astronaut is missing because of him. So he does what Morty always does, and he tries to fix it. He buys a regular snake from a pet store, names it Slippy, paints her to match the dead astronaut, and then drops her on Snake Planet as a replacement. Within hours, snake Terminators start to appear in the Smith house. Not metaphorical Terminators, actual Terminator snakes, metal endoskeletons, time sphere arrivals, the whole franchise. They pop in, and a snake disturbs Morty while he's rubbing his own snake. Another appears from the past to save him, then another from the future to kill the second one. It's the whole Terminator idea. Rick explains that Morty set this all in motion himself by adding Slippy to the equation. The snakes had discovered that Slippy wasn't from their world. It united them against alien life instead of fighting each other, so they basically solved snake racism by making them racist towards aliens. It made them develop time travel, and now infinite snake futures are all colliding in the present because they're all fighting each other. Rick and Morty travel to the current snake pentagon. The snakes haven't invented time travel yet, but suddenly future Rick and Morty appear, giving them their snake costumes and a book of time travel equations translated into snake language. Future Morty has a black eye. They go to Snake MIT in 1985, they leave the book there, snake students find it, time travel happens, they send a student back to the 19th century to prevent Snake Abraham Lincoln's assassination. But that causes a ripple effect, altering the timeline, and now his present is ruled by snake Nazis. More snakes attack, the time paradox compounds, and then the solution comes from outside, the time police, those testicle monsters from season 2, and they detect this timeline chaos and they intervene. They go back 65 million years, and they beat the first tool-using snake to death with clubs. Every time-traveling snake vanishes. They eat their own tails as they disappear, kind of like an Ouroboros thing. It's kind of cool. Morty still remembers everything, but basically this whole thing now never happened. The Snake Planet continues, completely ignorant that they almost conquered time itself, and they got wiped out in the past, and that timeline never existed. Jerry then lands in the backyard, having spent the B-plot floating helplessly through the air. There was this whole thing where he grabbed onto a plane, he rejected some help out of spite, his bones shatter, Rick half-heartedly heals him. Alright, future Rick and Morty appear one last time. They still have to complete the loop, right? They have to deliver the costumes to plant the book to create time travel in snake language. Even though it already didn't happen, that did happen, they were going in a circle. Alright, that's the rule of time travel. It's why we know Rick doesn't like it. You have to do the thing that creates the problem that forces the solution that erases the problem. As they leave, Rick implies that he's gonna be punching Morty. And that's the black eye explained. Rattlestar Rick Lactica is the only episode of the 3 where events actually happen in the show's reality. Morty really went to Snake Planet, like the snakes really attacked them, the time police really erased an entire civilization. It was all there, and then it all disappeared. But like, does it even count? If it was all erased, did it even happen? Does it matter? If the snakes don't remember, if they're not intelligent anymore, if the only evidence is Morty's trauma and some bloodstains that shouldn't exist? The episode deliberately chose the most confusing version of time travel, the one where cause creates effect creates cause. Rick has to give himself the solution because he'll have already having given himself the solution beforehand, which is why we know Rick shelved it to begin with. The snakes attack because they will develop time travel because they're attacking. It's a story that exists to kind of not make sense and to eat itself by the tail, Ouroboros. But the cruelest part is that Morty's compassion caused all of this. He felt guilty about one dead snake, and then his solution killed billions of sentient snakes across all of time. They were erased so thoroughly that they never even existed to be killed. This episode asks all the time traveler paradox questions. Is empathy worth it if it leads to genocide? Is fixing mistakes worth it if the fix is worse? Or should you just stay in the car? Rick knows he's in a TV show. He's one of those meta characters. The confusion you feel watching these episodes, that's Rick's everyday experience as one of the smartest cartoon characters in existence. He's got that cartoon meta power. Knowing that you're fictional but having to live anyway, surrounded by infinite versions of yourself and infinite families and infinite sentient beings who can all be erased at a moment's notice, and then being aware that you're even just a narrative structure and you're just a character meant to sell toys and sell stuff to people watching. It must be horrible. But that's Rick and Morty for you. And speaking of things that come in threes, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're looking for more mysteries that no one can solve just by watching an episode one time, check out our video on Gumball. There's also 3 episodes there that are connected, yet no one has solved just yet, so make sure to check that out, and I'll see you there. Peace.